Hello again, everyone. Edwin Learnard back once again in this YouTube astrological segment. I'm going to be talking about having an Aries Sun in a natal chart. Now, first off, what I want to get at is some of you may remember when I first started my YouTube astrology channel, I had done videos on sun signs. It was right after, I think I started the rising signs first, and then I went through the sun signs, but they were a little bit concise. Some people may have referred to them as snappy. So I decided to make some another series on the sun signs, in which they would be a little more descriptive and a little bit longer. So anyway, people. Well, first off, as far as the Aries Sun goes, the basic fundamental character, which is the Sun. The Sun being an Aries can be aggressive, assertive, abrupt, courageous, impulsive, impetuous. Aries people often, they may act before thinking, and that would be especially true if the Sun is positioned before Mercury in the chart. Sun is about our actions. Mercury is thinking. If the Sun is posited before Mercury in a natal chart, the person may often act prior to thinking. Now, and the basic fundamental character can also be very outspoken and direct. Aries people, Aries Sun may often speak their mind. They're not going to generally hold back. Um, and also, Aries Sun, some other characteristics. Aries can be acerbic and also combative and egocentric as well. Now, of course, you gotta look for modifying influences and contraindicators in the natal chart. Such as having much different ascendant. Somebody that has an Aries Sun but has their rising sign in a more passive sign like Taurus or Pisces will not come across as aggressive as outspoken or even combative as the typical Aries Sun. Now, the Sun is also connected with one's focus. So, having an Aries Sun, the person may put a lot of focus, on leadership, whether it's working as some manager or authority figure somewhere, and also initiative. Um, the thing too is it's also about fight, not necessarily in a bad way, but standing up for others, fighting for one's rights, as some examples. And also there could be a focus and attention put on being pioneering on innovation by creating new things and being first in things as well. I've seen a number of Aries Sun people in sports, be number one in things. I believe, a former NFL quarterback, Peyton Manning, who has his son in Aries, wound up being first in a number of statistical categories, at least before, Tom Brady may have surpassed at least some of them. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, had and former NBA player, has his son in Aries, and he was number one in points scored for some time until LeBron James eventually surpassed him. Pete Rose, who was a former Major League Baseball player who was vilified to some degree because of the gambling situation, he still has the most hits in Major League history. And again, he's a Sun in Aries, Aries rising, I believe, as well. And he still has the record for all-time, I believe, all-time hits in the major leagues. Uh, Another thing too is that Aries may put focus just on new beginnings, new endeavors in general. Aries is the sign of new beginnings and generally won't hesitate or procrastinate much in terms of starting them. Another thing too, it's also it could be when you look at Aries is the sun in astrology is also connected with our drive and motivation. So having an Aries sun, the person may have a lot of drive and motivation in terms of leading others. It could be doing something with adventure, maybe driven to go on adventures or for new beginnings in general. Again, as I stated before, that Aries is the sign associated with new beginnings. And also, Aries may have a lot of that drive, motivation, and incentive just to stand up for others, and for those that may not have, that will and that courage to stand up for themselves. And it's also about being driven and motivated to be independent as well, to be self-reliant. Um, Aries generally will like to do things, on their own. But what's interesting about Aries too is that I've noticed with a lot of Aries people is that they could be, say if they're in, a supervisory role in their, position of management or authority, and they give their workers something to do. A lot of times they'll get in that mix and they'll work with them as well, because I think Aries just doesn't like to be stagnant. They just want to be able to be part of whatever it is, they're connected with their position, whatever job. Sometimes so if they give somebody else a job to do, they feel they need to be part of it, and themselves. I think a lot of it is just attributed for that need for action and activity with Aries. Now, another thing too, Aries may be driven and motivated, Sun and Aries may be driven and motivated toward conflict as well, but not necessarily due to something negative associated with them. It could just be if Sun and Aries person genuinely, I should say, I'm sorry, disagrees with someone on something. They may feel that they have they have a right to combat it and say what they need to say, what they think is actually, the accurate, statement or belief in terms of that argument. So another thing too is that the sun in astrology can indicate where we want to shine. And the thing is, Aries Sun and Aries people may want to shine in terms of, it could be combat or volatile sports, such as football or hockey. As some examples, combat sports can include like judo, wrestling, boxing, as some examples, and even war games. It's interesting. Some of you may remember that movie War Games with Matthew Broderick, who ironically is a Sun in Aries. Now, another thing too, Aries may want to shine in things connected with innovation and doing things that are pioneering. Um, could be also to some specific subjects or fields that are connected with Aries, include speech pathology, firefighting, doing something even with helmet design, professions that are connected with one's head. Also, surgery, law enforcement, as some other examples. And the sun is also associated with one's creative energy. So Aries may bring some of that creative energy they have into some examples: welding, carpentry, the military. It could be sports, such as creating one's own, sport, or making some creative, modifications, to an existing sport. As some examples, it could be gun or weapon design, making, designing certain guns or weapons. Um, could also be, the use of cutting instruments, such as making those, the cutouts for, certain, certain things, certain designs, or what have you. And another thing too, another thing about, the sun, astrology, it's also about life, our life. And the life of the sun and Aries individual may be one that's very active, that has, where the person is generally not stagnant, constantly doing things, wants to stay busy. One in which one acts. I mean, the sun is also about our actions. So one in which somebody acts with little hesitation or procrastination, with a lot of enthusiasm, and also a life in which one isn't readily discouraged. Um, and one in which a person may want to conquer. Because Aries, above, all the other signs on average, I would say wants to fight and win. And whether it's in a sports competition or what have you. Now, another thing too is that the sun has a connection to the physical body. Yes, the ascendant is what dominates the appearance of the physical body, but the sun plays a role in this as well. The Aries, physically, it includes, as far as what corresponds with Aries, that would include the brain, the head, the face, and the skull. And Aries has to be, some Aries people have to be careful regarding accidents as well. And because that, of course, can have, could affect the physical body to its detriment. Aries people may often be lean and spare in build, but you have to keep in mind too that most people are going to have a different ascendant, and that will modify the appearance greatly. Another thing too, what's interesting is that the sun is associated with one's identity. I've had at least 2 Aries people tell me when I would ask them about their sign, they would start off saying, well, I'm actually quite typical of my sign. And sure enough, they would say Aries. And what's interesting about that is that, as many of you may know, that the sun is exalted, and Aries is supposed to be the best position of the sun. And the sun is about our identity and our conscious. So it's not surprising that Aries Sun, many Aries Sun people are very conscious and cognizant about who they actually are, even if they have a different rising sign or ascendant. Now, another thing too is that the thing is the sun in astrology is also associated with the biological father and children. So one or more of these people may actually be an Aries sun, moon, or ascendant person, or simply embody those characteristics. Anyway, people, that'll conclude this YouTube astrological segment. Until next time, Edwin Learnard saying, stay well.